The next morning, after Ramesvar gave Bhagavatam class, he was heading back to his quarters across the street. I caught up with him, and I told him what Bhardraj told us. I asked him if what Bhardraj said was true. We are now standing in the middle of Watsika Avenue with devotees walking by. Ramesvar looked over one shoulder, looked over the other shoulder to see who might be hearing us. Fearing we might be overheard, he invited me to come to his quarters so we could talk in private. We went to his office where he sat behind his desk, which was a coffee table, and he sat on tables. He sat on pillows on the ground. It was like in Srila Prabhupada's room, and I sat on the other side. As soon as we were seated, he leaned forward and told me, "What Bhardraj said is true." I was petrified. My mind just blanked out. I was trying to comprehend the repercussions of what that meant. If what Bhardraj said was true, then I could have, I should have, I would have gone to be with Srila Prabhupada. And if what Bhardraj said was true, that could only mean what Ramesvar and Satsvarup had told us was a lie. Ramesvar then sat up straight, assuming a proud posture. He said in a brazen and boastful tone, "Almiyatma, I saved ISKCON." What does that mean, that he saved ISKCON? If Bhardraj was speaking the truth and Srila Prabhupada actually wanted us to go to India and to be with him, what in the world would Ramesvar's and Satsvarups lying to us have anything to do with saving ISKCON? Ramesvar saved ISKCON from what? Or who? What was he talking about? Ramesvar immediately tried to explain what he meant. He said that one day in Vrindavan, about a month before Srila Prabhupada departed, he saw several book distributors show up. He asked them how they got their tickets to come to India. They told him they had been pocketing part of their book distribution collections until they had enough money to buy their tickets. At that time, that was practically, as it should be today, but it was practically unheard of. The book distributors were either brahmacharis or brahmacharinis, and 100% of their donations they collected by distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, they gave in full to their temple. To pocket any of it would be like directly stealing from Srila Prabhupada. That was his money. But these men wanted so badly to come and see Srila Prabhupada one last time that they did what they felt they had to do. And they admitted to doing it to their own GBC, Ramesvar, who was also the head of the BBT and practically the head of book distribution worldwide. They also informed Ramesvar that a number of other Sankirtan book distributors were planning on doing the same thing. Not just other Sankirtan devotees, but a whole lot of devotees were talking of coming to India to be with Srila Prabhupada in what now seemed inevitable would be his last days with us. Ramesvar told me that in his view, this was very bad. He reminded me that the main income for the temples at that time was the sales of Srila Prabhupada's books. The temples depended on the money collected by the book distributors for paying their bills. Most of the temple properties at that time still had bank mortgages, loans and mortgages. Ramesvar told me that if those devotees had come to India, there would have been no money to pay for the temple property mortgages. And those two book distributors had told Ramesvar that so many were planning on coming as well. Ramesvar told me that at that moment, he knew he had to do something to stop not only them, but all the devotees from leaving their services. Ramesvar told me that in his view, the future of ISKCON depended on everyone's remaining where they were, staying put and remaining where they were, and stay engaged in their services. Otherwise, the whole of ISKCON, in his view, would fall apart if the masses of devotees left their services. It was Ramesvar's view that the devotees coming to Vrindavan were of no help to Srila Prabhupada, and yet their services were needed back at the temples. He reminded me that Srila Prabhupada had first told devotees he would soon be leaving this world back in May. When Ramesvar saw those book distributors show up, it was now October. 5 months had passed, and Srila Prabhupada had not departed yet. He said there's no way of knowing how much longer Srila Prabhupada may stay on. What if he didn't leave for another 5 months? Ramesvar reminded me October was less than 2 months before the Christmas marathons would begin. He continued, the holiday book distribution marathons bring in 1/2 or more of the temple's yearly income. If the majority of the book distributors all leave their services, the temples won't have the money to pay their loans. If Srila Prabhupada didn't leave this world for another 5 months and all the book distributors came to India and they miss out on the Christmas marathon, then it would only be a few months and all of the ISKCON properties will be lost and foreclosed on by the banks. Ramesvar said there was no way he could allow that to happen. Ramesvar then leaned forward again and said, Ami, if you and all the devotees had gone to India, and while you were in India, all the temple properties got foreclosed, there would have been no more ISKCON left for you to come back to. The banks will have taken all the temple properties. Without the temples, you and all the other devotees would have just gone all your separate ways. Do you see? There would have been no more ISKCON. So you see, Amiyatma, why I had to stop the devotees from leaving their temples and coming to India? So on seeing those 2 book distributors, Ramesvar had already decided he had to do something to keep everyone from coming. But then, the very next day or so, Ramesvar heard that Srila Prabhupada had actually requested all his disciples to come to be by his side. Ramesvar told me, and this is as well as I can remember the exact quote, he said, when I heard that Srila Prabhupada had requested all his disciples to come to India to be with him, I knew I had to take action to prevent the devotees from hearing and acting on that request by Srila Prabhupada. As Ramesvar spoke those words, I vividly recall a very cold, numb feeling came over me. Just a very dark, cold darkness had descended on my future and on ISKCON's future. Ramesvar was telling me this as if what he had done was something wonderful and noble. After all, in his mind, he had just saved ISKCON. I sat there practically bewildered, that he seemed to have no clue how offensive those words he just spoke were. He told me he had to take action to prevent devotees from hearing the words of his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Well, he was thinking what he was telling me was so wonderful. I sat there realizing that he had taken action solely aimed at preventing Srila Prabhupada's loving personal request from being fulfilled. He saw that what he had done was so noble, yet I saw what they had just committed, Guru Aparad. I sat there with this numb feeling of disbelief that a so-called advanced disciple of Srila Prabhupada could even speak or think like that, let alone act on such offensive thoughts. Ramesvar continued that if the book distributors and everyone else had heard that Srila Prabhupada actually wanted everyone to come, he said that for certain all the Sankirtan devotees from every temple would have abandoned their service and gone. Abandoned their service? Their service to Krishna was to fulfill the desire and the personal request of their spiritual master. If Srila Prabhupada had requested them to come to be with him, that was their service. I was bewildered how such an advanced leader of our movement could see the same event so much differently than such an insignificant devotee as myself. Ramesvar continued that if that were allowed to happen, if all the Sankirtan devotees, the book distributors, had gone to Vrindavan, ISKCON would have been finished. He then revealed to me what his mindset was at that time. The only reason we're having this conversation and why he opened up and was telling me all of this in so much detail was because I had heard from Bhardraj, who had been in Prabhupada's room, and he had direct knowledge that Srila Prabhupada had made that request. Ramesvar now knew that I knew that he had lied to us. So he felt that he had to explain everything to me so that I would understand. I had no problem understanding. It's just that my understanding of what they did was totally different than his understanding. But he wanted me to understand it in the same way he did, to see it in his perspective. So he went into detail, explaining the whole thought process and the justifications and the rationalizations he used that brought him to take the actions he took. The only way how I can describe how I felt as he was telling me all of this is just one word: numb. I sat there and literally froze. My mind froze, my heart froze. I just totally felt numb. Numbness and darkness, as I felt like a heavy dark cloud had descended on ISKCON's future and my own future. I was paralyzed and I couldn't say a single word. Maybe Ramesvar saw that as a reason to keep explaining himself more and more, because he kept telling me more and more. He continued to explain that he decided that the only action he knew he could take was to come back to Los Angeles, which was ISKCON's world headquarters at the time, and where he was the GBC, and personally try and convince everyone to stay. But he told me that he knew that if it was just him asking us not to leave, it wouldn't be enough to stop so many devotees from going to see Srila Prabhupada, especially if word leaked out that Prabhupada actually asked everyone to come. He told me that he knew the only way devotees would listen to him is if he told us that it was Srila Prabhupada who actually requested us not to come. I mean, oh sure, why not? If you're going to take the offensive position of taking action against your own guru and trying to prevent your own spiritual master's personal request from being fulfilled, I mean, what better way to do it than lying to all your god brothers and god sisters using your guru's name? What better way to offend your guru than to include lying to everyone else and telling us 180 degrees the opposite of what Srila Prabhupada actually said? Ramesvar told me he immediately went to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and presented his idea and asked Tamal what he thought of it. According to Ramesvar, Tamal Krishna agreed that it was the best plan and that it needed to be done quickly before the Christmas marathon began. But Tamal told him that it wouldn't work by Ramesvar acting alone, so he suggested that other GBC men be included. Ramesvar didn't give me the names of the other GBC members. He only told me that he and Tamal met with the other GBC men who were still in Vrindavan at the time to inform them of their plan and the need to make sure that the book distributors didn't leave their temples and come to Vrindavan. Ramesvar explained that he came back to the LA temple because at that time in 1977, it was very difficult to make even one long-distance phone call or send a fax or telegram to even one other center at that time in Vrindavan, India. But from his office in Los Angeles, Ramesvar was able to call all the other ISKCON centers all over the world and inform them of Srila Prabhupada's request that no one leave their services, that no one whimsically run off to be with Srila Prabhupada. He told me that when he got back, he heard that Satsvarup was about to leave for India, And Ramesvar informed him of his and the other GBC's decision, and that devotees need to be told not to go. Satsru understood and agreed to come to Los Angeles and back up Ramesvar to make it more believable and acceptable to the devotees.